So this is my presentation for, for today, the ideology of monographism and the advantage of DIGRAPHIA, the case of Lombard. Even though many languages still exist in the world that do not have a writing system and are only oral, there is no doubt that in modern times a minority original language stands more chances to survive if it can be written down. The fact that the language has a written form can greatly help its status and allows for many more strategies of revitalization to be attempted than if it were just oral. For the same language, many writing systems are of course possible. The problem is that sometimes the minority community gets divided over this issue of graphization, and long and even harsh diatribes have arisen. Believing that one language should have only one writing system can be seen as an ideology of monographism, as I call it, an ideology that is closely related to that of standard language. The problem with this ideology is that it is an either-or ideology, and it is normally the orthography which gets official support that wins out. The alternative orthography, orthographies, however, may be around for a long time, together with resentment and division, which is not good for language revitalization. Lombard, an endangered regional language spoken in northern Italy, is going to be used as a case study in this paper to exemplify the problem with this ideology and its possible solution. DIGRAPHIA refers to the use of more than one orthography or script to write the same language. For more than two writing systems, the term multigraphia could also be used. There are two main types of digraphia, diachronic and synchronic. Diachronic digraphia, the most common case, refers to different orthographies or scripts that have succeeded each other over time. Turkish is one example, which was written using Arabic characters until 1928 and is now written using Roman characters. Synchronic digraphia, on the other hand, refers to the contemporary use of two, or in some cases more than two orthographies. This may be due to different reasons, mostly religious and political, but also because the language itself requires different scripts to be written.
Paolo,
yeah, sorry.
It seems that your slides do not advance. It's always the same.
Always the same, because I have the correct slide here in front of me. How come?
The title slide.
Something maybe
You're sharing the wrong window.
Am I? Okay, let me go back. So you can see the title, the first one, or you cannot?
The title and the list of slides on the left.
That's, let me, okay, this is what you see. If I do it like this, can you see introduction?
Do that, yes, it works.
It works now, so I just do that. It will be smaller, but I don't know why with the, okay. So basically, sorry so much. So graphization. Okay, I was here. No, I was here. Yeah, I was talking about synchron. We're starting to talk about synchronic digraphia. Sorry again. So we go on like that. Please tell me if there are still problems. So synchronic digraphia, on the other hand, refers to the contemporary use of two, or in some cases, more than two orthographies. This may be due to different reasons, mostly religious and political, but also because the language itself requires different scripts to be written. See, for example, Japanese, or for didactic reasons. A marginal case, according to Dale, 1980, which is, for example, the case of Mandarin, which can also be written using pinyin, the official Romanized form. Can you see now marginal digraphia? Is it okay?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. All right, I'll go on like this then. As Dale has explained, the most common type of situation in which a marginal type of digraphia is said to occur is the language learning situation, or the attempt to communicate something of the sounds of the language to people who don't know the usual script in which the language is written. Despite what many people may think, this ideology, the ideology of monographism, has been very strong and pervasive, to the point of having disrupted and hindered quite a few minority language planning efforts. Often, when a writing system is devised by experts or activists for a language that did not have one, some other individuals or groups within the local community or even the academic community may come up with alternative orthographies which are considered better, that is more precise or authentic, inclusive, or simply more peculiar and distinct from the majority language in the country. For the same language, many writing systems are of course possible, some deeper, some shallower, some using the Latin script, others using other scripts, such as Cyrillic or Arabic. It largely depends on the purposes or cultural or political orientation of the proposers, and any of these systems has advantages and disadvantages. The problem is that sometimes the minority community gets divided over this issue of graphization, and long and even harsh diatribes have arisen. I've come across a few examples of this ideology and its consequences, such as the opposition between the official orthography for Galician in Spain, closer to the Spanish one, and the reintegrationist one, closer to the Portuguese spelling, or the official orthography for Friulian in Friuli, northeast Italy, and the Fagin system using Hacek diacritics, which make it look more Slavic. Something similar is happening in Lombardy, but this will be discussed further on. Let's look at Lombard. Lombard is one of the languages of the Gallo-Italic group, or perhaps better, of the Gallo-Romance Cisalpine group, belonging to the Western Romance family of Indo-European languages, genealogically closer to French and Occitan varieties than to Italian. According to the 2006 ISTA survey, about 3.5 million people in the Lombardy region can speak Lombard, that is 35.7% of the regional population. However, to this figure, the speakers of related varieties in bordering areas such as Eastern Piedmont, Canton Ticino, and the southern valleys of Canton-Grischun in Switzerland, and most areas in Western Trentino should be added. In any case, these 3.5 million speakers, and we don't know how proficient the Lombard may be, are on the decrease. Even just by looking at the results of the ISTA survey carried out only 6 years before, we can see a decrease of almost 3 percentage points, from 38.6% in 2000 to 35.7% in 2006. We could reasonably deduce that Lombard, in the same way as other Italian regional languages, is which, by the way, often called dialects in Italy, is losing at least 1/4 of its speakers in every successive generation, which clearly places Lombard among endangered languages. In fact, according to IGIDS, one of the most well-known scales for the assessment of language vitality, developed by Lewis and Simons in 2010, Lombard, like some other Italian regional languages, may score, according to the areas, between 6B and 8A. 6B corresponds to the label threatened, whereas 8A corresponds to the label moribund. Only 2 more grades separate the latter grade from the last 10 extinct. And this is another clear sign of the predicament Lombard finds itself in. Even though the total number of speakers is gradually shrinking, a small pool of new speakers is present and very active. For these mostly young speakers, Lombard is a second language they have at some point decided to learn, even though chances for using it are not many, particularly in the big cities like Milan. In many cases, the main domain where they can use the language is the internet. Okay, this, as you can see in the map where Lombard is spoken, here, northern Italy. The Lombard language can be roughly divided into four main varieties. So the Western Lombard, this area. Then, so it includes, for instance, Milan, Varese, Como, Lecco, Sondrio, Milan, Monza, Pavia, Lodi, but also parts of Piedmont here, Novara and Verbania, and Canton Ticino, Switzerland. Then Eastern Lombard is this area. So Bergamo, Brescia, even northern Cremona, northern Mantua here. Then we have Alpine Lombard up here. So Sondrio, and also here, Trento, province of Trento in Trentino, and Verbania here, and also in part of Canton Ticino and Canton Grischun. And then the south, this southern part, the so-called peripheral varieties of the lower lands, so Pavia, Lodi, Cremona, and Mantua. Okay. Sorry. So far, each Lombard variety has been written using different orthographies, some more phonetic, some more etymological. For example, the Western variety of Lombard, and more specifically Milanese, from Milan, has been written so far using two main systems. The traditional or classic one, which is a little bit more etymological, and the modern one, which is clearly more phonetic, which is used in Switzerland as well. The two systems differ mainly in the way vowels are represented. You can see here. So this is IPA, and this is how it is written, the classical or traditional orthography, and the modern one. In both orthographies, the consonants are spelled as in Italian, with the addition of the digraph SG before E and I, to represent the sound je, which does not exist in Italian, and the use of an apostrophe to separate S from C and G from E and, from C and G before E and I, so that they are read respectively as sc and sj, sound combination that do not exist in Italian. However, a new writing system was devised by the linguist Lysander Brasca about 14 years ago and published in 2011, which is currently used by a dozen activists and freely interpreted and adapted by others. This very interesting system has been called Scrive-Lombard and defined as a local polynomic orthography. And its aim is to allow the speakers of all Lombard variety to write every word of their own local variety in a graphic form which is very similar or even identical to the form in which the speakers of any other Lombard variety would write it, so that the identity and meaning of the words would be easily recognized by speakers of other varieties. This implies that the system cannot reflect directly all the phonetic features of any variety, and the speakers of each variety will need to learn how to write the system that is necessarily the most etymological and least phonetic among the ones used so far. Scrive-Lombard looks quite different from the orthographies that have been used so far for the Lombard varieties, which are mostly based on Italian spelling. Whereas the use of vowels is similar to that in the traditional Milanese orthography, consonants are used that are not found in the Italian alphabet, such as C with cedilla, J and X, while others are used differently from Italian, such as a Q, that can be followed directly by E and I without the interposition of U, corresponding to K and Ki, or G, which is mostly pronounced as G, even before E and I, unlike Italian. On the whole, whereas the traditional Milanese orthography is, at least as far as vowels are concerned, a little closer to French, and the modern one a little closer to German, Scrive-Lombard is closer to the way Lombard was spelled in medieval literature. Now, as Lübke has explained, philologists, linguists, and educators have insisted for several centuries that the ideal orthography has a one-to-one correspondence between grapheme and phoneme. Many lay people who have a limited knowledge of linguistic phenomena also seem to share this viewpoint, including some activists for the local language. However, even though all these individuals tend to believe that it is better in an orthography to overspecify than to underspecify, underspecification, or the conflation of several phonemes into one grapheme, can be a powerful tool for the creation of a pan-dialectal orthography in the case of unstandardized and internally diverse speech varieties, like in Lombardy. Shallow systems, like the traditional modern orthographies, have the great disadvantage that they can only be used in a restricted area, or they need a standardized pronunciation, whereas deep systems such as Lombard are more transparent, flexible, and allow for local pronunciations of the language. This means that if, on the one hand, new speakers may find it difficult to learn how to read and write the language at initial stages using Lombard, the great advantage will be that they will be able to read and understand all Lombard varieties, and the sense of unity of the language will be enhanced. This also means that it will be possible to publish more copies of any written document, from poetry to novels and even to scientific books, enlarging the audience, because any Lombard speaker would be able to read them, and reducing costs. It is because learners seem to be helped by shallow orthographies that reflect the actual pronunciation, that linguists such as Salabank and Marquis have affirmed that a shallow orthography is easier to, for beginning readers to process. There is a consensus that phonological, in particular phonemic awareness, is beneficial to learning to read, and that shallow orthographies, which make most use of that awareness, are helpful to the learner at an early stage. On the other hand, probably most of the world's readers use deep orthography, more or less deep orthographies, where the sound and the letter composition words are indirectly related, or sometimes even unrelated. Returning to the Lombard language, an example of the same sentence in the Milanese variety, written using the traditional, the modern, or classic, and the local polynomial system can be seen in this table. So English on top, then Italian, mio cugino ha sentito la sua voce ed è corso fuori ad abbracciarla. And then we have the traditional system, the modern system, and the local polynomial system. A Milanese would read it in exactly in the same way, the three sentences. El mio cousin la sentu la sua voce et le cous feu abbracciarla su. Same in the other one. You can notice a little bit the differences. Okay. Whereas the last sentence would be read like the two previous ones by Milanese speaker, as I showed you, it could easily be read by a speaker of Bergamasco, from Bergamo, east of Milan, for example. So Eastern Lombard, and understood just by knowing that El Cuisine in Western Lombard stands for the Bergamasco Old German, meaning the cousin. In fact, the same sentence in the Bergamasco variety would be written as, well, I'm not from Bergamo, so I'm not so sure how this sentence is properly read. Olme German la senti la sua voce, le course for abbracciarla su. I'm not so sure. A sentence that is very similar to the one above and perfectly understandable by a Milanese, for instance. Very clear for me. The list of frequent words that are completely different in the different varieties is not long, like my cousin, and they could all be learned very quickly. Now, there are different opinions on the merits of one or another of these orthographies, but the idea is that in the end, only one should be adopted. This is, I believe, an aspect of our dualistic Western culture that fails to realize that adopting more than one system may be the best solution to prevent divisions among activists and speakers. In fact, using all these orthographies in different contexts, that is, accepting the regime of DIGRAPHIA, would provide speakers with several advantages. Some may think that this would be burdensome, but as we have already explained, there are languages in the world that use more than one graphic system. Japanese children, for example, have to learn 4 different systems at school: hiragana, katakana, kanji, which are used in combination, even romaji, the Latin script, and this does not seem to be particularly problematic. On the other hand, the Malay language, I mentioned this because I'm in Malaysia now, it can be written using the Latin or Arabic script, the more traditional script, even though the Latin is not used much these days. If one system is shallower and one deeper, like in China, like Pinyin and the Chinese characters, Hanzi, or in the Lombard case, the classical modern orthography system as Lombard, the shallower system could help speakers, especially new speakers, to learn the local language as the shallow form Pinyin in China and the traditional modern orthographies in Lombardy, would be closer to the pronunciation, whereas the deeper system, Chinese characters in China and Script Lombard in Lombardy, would allow everybody to enjoy wider communication, respectively with all Chinese speakers. Well, this is already a reality, and with all Lombard speakers in the region. For the specific case of Lombard, specifically Western Lombard, other advantages can also be seen. Learning the modern system would allow speakers to read comfortably material produced in Switzerland, and they produce quite a lot of material there. Whereas the traditional system would make reading Milanese literature easy, as most of it, mostly poetry and plays, but quite a lot, has been written using this older system. Using it would also help not to alienate those older speakers and activists who use and are used, and I would say also fond of the traditional system. That is all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Questions? I have a question. You said that Scriver Lombard is closer to medieval.
Yeah.
Spelling of Lombard.
Yeah.
Will that be of any practical use, or will it bring modern Italians closer to medieval texts, or is it just out of political choice?
Yeah, as I was saying, I'm not the author of this system, but I mean, we are friends and we talked a lot about this. And yeah, there is not a practical use. I mean, as far as medieval literature, I mean, of course, there is a little bit of a symbolic, a little bit of symbolism behind it, just to show the long history of Lombard. Of course, there is, but the main purpose is quite practical. Using that system would allow people all over, because the different varieties are, of course, I mean, they have most of the features in common. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to talk about Lombard language, but also a lot of differences because they evolved over time, and some are more conservative, some are more modern, how do you say, less conservative, like Milanese. So yeah, he chose those letters because they are linked somehow with the history, but the purpose is very practical.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Paolo.
Yeah, you're welcome.